protein for breakfast has pretty much changed my life, I'd say.
I hear such conflicting info about whether or not supplements do anything. I'm really keen to hear your perspective. This podcast is brought to you by Redwings Horse Sanctuary and Equilibrium Products.
Hello everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to This Equestrian Life, episode 19.
Hello.
19.
I know. Whoop whoop.
Nearly at the end of season 2, guys.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. You okay? Very, very silent from you. One word.
Yeah, no, I
answers
thought
to
my brain was going very fast. I was like, so many things to say. So I sort of went even slower. We had a really good reaction to last week's episode, which was the equine nutritionist. And this week we have a human nutritionist. So we're going to get a really nice balance. But yeah, lots of people...
Covering our bases, I think we'd call it.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of people very into that. And my vitamin and mineral supplement arrived today for Harley.
Oh, that's exciting.
So, on the podcast, if you haven't listened to last week's yet, we went through a bit of an exercise of like, oh, Harley's an everyday horse, here's what he's eating right now, what would you recommend? And obviously she had like minimal context, but she recommended a vitamin and mineral supplement, and she actually has a PDF on her website that she gives away for free. And so I went and looked at it, and the one on the top of that list was Feedmark's, what's it called? Better Vit.
Okay.
Better. I think it's got a funny it's like a pun. I did a video for it. Benevit, that's it. So BENE Vit. So I introduced 1 scoop. It's actually 3.5 scoops for a horse of his size in his level of work, which is quite a lot. But I put 1 scoop in his feed, and we'll see where we go.
That's the thing with powdered balancers. They are often a little bit more. I saw our friend Hayley, BL Horsemanship. She feeds Forage Plus, which is another good minerally based supplement.
That was on the list as well. Mm.
And she uses, they provide you with a protein shaker. And so then what she does is puts the powder in the protein shaker with liquid, shakes it, and then pours it in, so it's already like emulsified. So I thought that was quite interesting. That's another good way of giving your horse. Speedy Beat is the best transport system for powder, I find.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
Love it.
Vehicle. Best vehicle. How's your week been? You been busy?
It's actually been a fairly quiet week until about half an hour ago when I tried to set up the new microphone for this podcast. Jesus Christ. Miri and I were on this, and Miri, it started funny and then got quite serious quite quickly. Miri started filming because I was this mic is like meant to attach to a desk, so I was trying to do that, and then the shelf above my desk just like half collapsed. But I'm in the house on my own, and so I was like, oh, so
she's like stood up over I can hear everything, I can see nothing. And then she's like, oh God, this is actually quite bad. And then a moment later, then a shelf appears just dropping into view. And she's like, oh, my partner's going to tell me off because he told me I'd put too much on this shelf once upon a time, and now I've really overladen it. Oh, one of those moments when you're like, why? Why is this happening? But it's okay. Here we are. We've made it.
Well, he put it up for me years ago, and every now and again he'd be like, oh, the shelf is pretty full. It's a pretty full shelf you got there. And then one day I was in the house and I just heard like this huge crash, and I came into this room and everything had collapsed. And he was like, oh my God. He was like, I told you it was too heavy. I'll put it back up for you, but you have to like not put as many things on it. And to be fair, I've been really good, but I was trying to attach this...
Until today.
Things rough. We do.
Rough start. Well, I've had a bit of a cake. Well, so it started with an emergency vet on Bank Holiday Monday, which nobody ever wants. Yeah, poor Bentley had this isn't a very glamorous topic. He won't mind me talking about it because education is important. But part of the inside of his bottom became the outside, and it was really, really traumatic to look at. And I was on a walk and I was set up for this lovely day. I actually had the day off on Monday because I'd worked on Saturday. So I was a good business owner, and I gave myself Bank Holiday Monday off for the first time in like a decade. Bank holidays don't exist when you work with horses because you can't turn the computer off, can you? Just carry on. Blondie's not going to wait a day for me to turn up and feed her. So I was out walking the dogs having a lovely time, and then I was like, oh God, he was being really weird. And anyway, had to go to this emergency vet, had a really horrible time at the emergency vet. I actually don't enjoy that vet practice very much. I won't name any names, but I went there when my foal passed away.
Oh, right.
And I was trying to get my foal there to not pass away, and she passed away on the way there, and it was really sad. And I remember getting out of the car. She was in the back of the car because she was so poorly, because the horse box, anyway,
You were just
didn't
like,
have a
go.
horse box at that point, exactly. I remember getting out of the car, and this vet said to me, he was like, well, you know, you will learn from this. And I thought, I can't believe you just said that. Like, I'm essentially like a grieving parent right now, and you're saying that to me. Like, that was one of my first experiences of the place. And when I went there this time, it's a teaching hospital, so it's a university, and I do understand the need for learning, of course. Like, we all need to learn. But I do think that there is a time and a place for it, and I do think that it needs to come with more support than is in what goes on there. Anyway, this whole song and dance, there was blood involved, and it was really not very nice. And we're like in the waiting room, and Bentley's obviously in distress. He's really stressed out, and there's blood, like I said, and it's all really not good. And I didn't know what was going on. And this intern vet came and took Bentley away, which I thought was weird in itself, because normally you stay with a small animal. Took him away. He came back and he was like, okay, just hang out here. And I was kind of like, okay, what's going on? And then time passed, and other dogs went through, very unemergent dogs. Like, we had a chat with someone else in the waiting room, and they were like, oh yeah, she was just a little bit not herself this morning, so we wanted to come in and have her checked out. Right. And I'm thinking, you know, this is essentially like ER, like the emergency room, right? Like, you would have a bit of a scaled system. Like, if somebody came in with a bleeding bum, you might take it a bit more seriously, right? And then, this is the icing on the cake for me. A student, I do feel sorry for her. If she listens to this, I do apologise to you, because you did bear the brunt of me. And I deal with vets a lot, right? Like, and I understand protocol, and I'm like, I know how things work and when things are important, when they can wait, all the rest of it. And this student says, oh, would it be possible to take a bit of history? And I thought, okay, yeah. And she like took me off to this other room. So again, left Bentley with my partner in the waiting room. And then she sat me down. She was like, okay, so can you tell me about the last 24 to 48 hours? So I did. I had already told them this. And then she said, so where did you get Bentley from? I said, sorry? She was like, where did he come from? I said, what, 11 years ago? She was like, yeah. I said, what? At this point, I became quite exasperated, because I was like, look, the dog isn't getting the care he needs. He is bleeding on the floor. Like, I don't know how serious this is. So I cried at this point, and I said to her, I'm going to be completely blunt with you here. I will answer any question you have for whatever paperwork you need to do once my dog has received the care that he needs, because at this point he's not getting what he needs, and I'm extremely stressed by this. And I was like crying, and I'm like, oh, you really have to. But I was so angry. I was like, I can't believe that this is what is being prioritised over the dog's care. Like, whether you need me to jump through your hoops, I'll do what I need to do so that he does that.
Or if she was like, you and I do this, my colleague is going to go and look at that.
Exactly.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And I was just really like, for the sake of learning, what are we teaching in that moment? Like, what is that? And I said to her, can you understand where I'm coming from? And she was like, no, I really do get it. Like, I'm really sorry to have, like, upset you and put you in this situation.
You've got no control over the system, right?
Exactly. And it was just horrid. Anyway, long story short, they sent him home, and he was seemingly fine. Turns out, a day later, it happened again. We weren't told that this was definitely going to happen again. We weren't told that we needed to, like, definitely take him to the vet. We didn't any of these things. Anyway, he had to have emergency surgery Wednesday to have a little polyp removed. So that, anyway, all is fine. He's lying in his bed behind me, but it was quite stressful a week, and it wasn't very much fun, and yeah, hard going. And I posted about it on my Instagram, and I had a lot of people saying, like, yeah, they've had some, not nice experiences at vet practice, like some vets. And I think back to that conversation that we had with Lily about, like, vets having their expertise, and their specialities. And actually, when I took him to our normal vet who did his surgery, one of the first questions I said to her was, she's a grown-up 60-year-old lady. I said to her, is this a surgery you feel comfortable with, or would you like me to take him to a specialist? Because the money is not of an object in this moment. Like Bentley, I'd literally sell a kidney for him. So, and she was like, oh no, very comfortable. Thank you for asking, but this is, I appreciate you kind of opening that door in case that was the case. And I thought, yeah, I'm glad I asked, because for me it felt like something uncomfortable. And actually there was something I wanted to talk about. I had a message from somebody, and it does relate to this, I promise. She reached out to me a while ago to have a consult call, and it's about horses, this one, not about dogs, but we had a consult call, and she had a lovely pony called Andy, and she'd given me full permission to share this. She would like Andy's story to help others, so here I am sharing it. It's not got a happy ending, unfortunately, this story, but in some ways it has got the ending it had to have. And we had this consult call, and we talked about her pony, and she said these are the complexities of what's going on. He has a head tilt, and he's also he's just very difficult to do anything with. Everything feels like it's hard work, and it's really hard going. And we have had veterinary intervention, and they've kind of come back and said that nothing is wrong, carry on. He's a Welsh pony. Okay. And again, we're talking about this stereotype. This stereotype was given. He's a Welsh dragon. He's just this. He's just that. She saw another vet. Suspensories were scanned. Bone scan was done. And things were deemed okay at this point. And then things still were not good. And she had a third vet opinion. And at this point, sensitivity in the neck was seen, and he had the neck x-rayed, and he had really bad vertebrae in his neck, and they were impinging on he had a narrowing of where the spinal cord went, and also some of the vertebrae were kind of like the wrong shape. There's something called, I've heard of it being called ECVM, but it was slightly different. Regardless, this pony was never going to be okay. Right? And two other lots of vets had said he's okay, it's just behavioural. And
that's hard.
I was like, it is really hard, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't cases with horses where their behaviour is the thing, but it is so important that if we have this gut instinct that we do follow it, because our horses are always trying to communicate with us, always. Yeah. No matter, we've talked about it a lot, haven't we? And we talked about it with Lily, and I just think it's such an important topic to continue to remind people about, because there's just no such thing as a naughty horse. It doesn't exist. And when people say, oh, he really barks, but I don't think he's naughty, I'm like, no, of course he's not. He's not. They're not capable. Their brains don't work like that. They don't have that cognitive ability to say, I don't want to do this, I'm going to be cheeky or naughty or whatever it might be. And his owner wanted me to share that story because she really had to go through it. She had to go to three separate vets.
That's a lot. And even for a well-intentioned owner, financially and emotionally, you want the answer to be, oh, it's okay. Of course, no one wants to keep digging. Nobody wants to do that.
No.
And there's a lot of owners that would have been like, well, they're telling me I've gone to 2 now, and we talked about it before, where you see ads where people are people are looking for advice, and they're like, back and teeth checked, all fine, or X-rays done, all fine, and I'm like, that is not a big tick anymore. I really don't like it when people say that, and I understand it's because they want to say, look, I've tried to do the right thing, but it sometimes now feels like a bit of a cop out to be like, well, I checked his back and his back was fine, so it can't be, pain.
And I think, there is actually never a way that you can rule out pain. How can you possibly? Because my degree of discomfort to another person's degree of discomfort is 2 different things.
Yes.
And what one person experiences as a problem is not the same as the next. There's no blanket. There's no kind of, we can just cover it up. And I suppose that, it's like women's health, like we were talking about, the amount of women that are just told, oh, you've just got, bad periods or whatever, when actually they've got, really serious endometriosis or whatever it might be. And it's this kind of validation of the being that is so important. And I think that's what this owner did such a great job of. she validated her horse. She didn't say, yes, it's just behavioural. She didn't believe that.
Yeah. I do think it is difficult for everyday owners, because I found myself in this, well, not exact position before, but where you're really trying to figure out, and sometimes it's not easy to tell. You're like, oh, is my horse needing confidence? Are they a little bit worried? Are they stressed? Is it pain? And having to go through those things, because sometimes you can end up almost going down a rabbit hole, and actually it is, not always, we talk a lot about the edge cases, but a lot of the time it's like, oh, he needs a little more confidence, or to your point, there's a broken rung on the ladder, he needs some more knowledge, and it's not pain, it's this and that. But so I think it's also important to, I'm not saying ignore pain signals, don't do that, but sometimes it is quite simple things, like the simple things also still matter: confidence, education, knowledge, self-assuredness, feeling safe and comfortable.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, if you're, I think, just maybe summarise, like if you're noticing a really consistent pattern of something, that's, and a horse's face will tell you a huge amount. Equine pain face is a really good way of reading whether the horse is just maybe a bit nervous or whether they're really in discomfort. So things like furrowing of their eyebrow. I talked about it on a post recently. We're going through it a little bit with one of my horses. She's got a sore poll, and I think she's got an old injury, and it's never quite been fully dealt with, even in the time that I've had her. I have physios and therapists and all of those things, but potentially I've missed something. And she's even had a head CT, and I was told, there is a small change on the back of her poll, but it's not of any note. But what is not of note to your generic horse might be of note to her, because she's super sensitive, and it makes her an amazing sport horse. But because she's more highly sensitive, that small thing is a big thing for her. And I noted it on a video, because I posted a video about how to tie a rope halter.
Yeah,
and when I watched the footage back, she gets that little furrowed eyebrow, like her eyebrow becomes a bit triangular. I'm poking my eyebrow like this, and you can see when I do that, I get these wrinkles above my eyebrow.
Like
I'm
pushing
physically
your finger
just
up to your eyebrow.
Yeah,
so you get
I'm just like,
it's like a cartoonish.
Yeah, like a triangular eyebrow, but you get these wrinkles above it, and that's the same thing that a horse gets. So if I do that with myself, I look quite stressed, don't I? This is going to end up.
She's now got both fingers under both eyebrows. It's quite. And I'd love for our nutritionist guest to join at this very moment. That would be fun.
Wouldn't it just? But I was just talking about how there are so many signals that our horses can give us. So if you are noticing consistent behaviour with things like pain face, with things like tail swishing, with things like resistance or guarding of the body, refusing to let you walk around certain parts, not wanting you to tack them up, all of those kind of things, that is when you are not dealing with, to your point, uncertainty or lacking knowledge. Potentially that is when you are dealing with discomfort or pain, really explosive behaviour, really
like weird non-normal stuff, like head tilts, bucking on the right rein. That's not a horse who's nervous. Those are weird things. Do you know what I mean?
And I guess it's learning and giving that validation. I had a really interesting conversation with Aoife, my apprentice. I'm finding this journey of having an apprentice really cool, because she's 16, right? So she's like a completely different age gap to me. I've taught her since she was 5 years old, this girl. It's a really cool relationship that we have. So she feels very like free and open to talk to me. And she was saying today, we were talking about like, what is a flex? Honestly, I have to use modern children's language because I'm such an old person. So millennial. But I was saying like, for me, the greatest flex is that I could literally let any competent rider ride Zora. I mean, she wouldn't tolerate with somebody like
a flex about, for those who don't know, is something you're like really proud of, like you're flexing on something. Yeah,
like my new trainers, what a flex, that kind of thing. Sounds so old. But my point being is that my flex is how straightforward Zora is, right? Anyone can tack her up, anyone can lead her, anyone can put her on a horse box, I can take her anywhere, I can do anything on her, I could ride her backwards, I could fling my coat around above my head. For me, that is my biggest flex, because I'm like, yeah, this is really cool. no, she wouldn't jump the biggest jump. She wouldn't rear on command. She doesn't perform in some sort of dramatic way. My greatest flex is how regulated, calm, sensible, easygoing, unfazed by things she is. And that really wrung out for Aoife, because she was like, yeah, I have conversations with friends and they're like, oh, my pony's so naughty. Oh my God, she's so strong when I jump her. Oh, he was bucking on the hack the other day, you know, and they're quite like flexing on the wrong thing.
Well, they're like, there's a real TikTok trend with younger talkers. I see youths. That makes
the youths of today.
The youths are like, my pony doesn't like anyone else riding them. No one else could ride them, only me, because I know how to deal with their quirks. And I'm like, or there was
don't put on a baby voice. You will upset the talkers.
Sorry,
you will upset the youths. They will come at you with their
pitchforks.
pitchforks.
Anyway. But there was also a trend, and it was half ironic, where people were like, when you were young and your horse was young, and therefore you've made really weird buttons for things. Mm-hmm. And like some people were very self-aware of that, but others it was just like, I was like, oh, don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a video as well the other day that was like, I used to think that this was cool, and it was a video of a horse rearing, but now I think that this is cool, and it was a horse like just standing there looking really soft.
Yeah.
And I thought, I need to make that video.
Yeah.
Because I just don't, you know, and I've got videos like of horses like when I was riding, and they're like a bit like humpy bumpy. I wouldn't say like, you know, big extreme behaviours. I've never been one to ride through big behaviour, but definitely previously I would have ridden a stressed horse. I would have. And now I won't, because I see it from the ground. I see the pattern in the behaviour when you're working with them from the floor, and that's quite a cool flex, I suppose.
That's a cool flex.
We're going to have a really interesting conversation today. I'm a bit scared to talk about it because I think we might have to talk about bowel movements and stuff. That's good.
Oh my, I wasn't prepared for that. There's been a lot.
No?
I don't know if I'm prepared for all of this bum chat. There's been Ben's bum and then continuation of bums. But I am really excited to talk about the human side of nutrition, and I love that our podcast has space for this because we're all athletes, whether or not you believe it, you are. And when we had our kind of pre-chat, me and Ruth, who's the nutritionist we're going to be joined by, we got onto some really interesting areas, men versus women, and how a lot of science around nutrition has been based on men historically, as with many areas of medicine. And that was a sort of really interesting sort of little areas talking about different types of ways that people eat and stuff. I don't want to give away too much, but it will be really interesting, and I'm very excited to have her on.
I've got one more update before Ruth joins us, because it will be a continued one. My car has seemingly started dying today. It suddenly said to me that there's something wrong with the gearbox, and I'm going to have to get rid of that cockerel. What's going on with that cockerel? Why is he outside the window yelling so much? This is infuriating. But anyway, I think my car's giving up, so that's fantastic, isn't it?
It's not ideal.
No.
It's one of those really annoying adult problems.
Oh, adulting, yeah. The youths on TikTok wouldn't even know what it was like to have a car that's broken down.
I love that. Oh, I've entered Harley in an affiliated competition. First time.
One more time. In an affiliated or in an unaffiliated?
In an affiliated competition.
Oh, congratulations, that's exciting.
BD. We've done it once. He was 5 and I think he was actually okay for the whole test. He tried his best, but he was quite stressed by the banner and the field with the horse in it and the livery yard behind the thing, and it was all a bit much for him. And towards the end of the test he was like, I can't do it, and then the judges were amazing and came out of their car and were like, that was so good, like, you know, don't worry, da da da. Yeah, that's how bad it was. But they let me school in the arena next door, and that was really good. So anyway, I backed off doing affiliated for after that, because I was like, we're missing some knowledge and some confidence, and we just went back to working at home and then schooling at venues. And now I'm like, no, I think we're ready to go back and try a little test, so we're going to do that. I think it's in July.
That's exciting.
Be good.
Nice.
Be nice to see, you know, where you are. I got a memory the other day, and it was a year ago, and it was me going out cantering away from home in a big open space for the first time with my coach, and I was like, that's cool, because you think how far you've come from that one moment. It was cool.
I love that.
Yeah. Me too.
What is it we say? We only look back to see how far we've come. I just want to take a moment to thank one of the sponsors of our podcast, Equilibrium Products. Equilibrium has been kind enough to gift us some items to test out while we're recording this series. And one of the products that I have been testing out has been their Equilibrium, the Tri-Zone brushing boots. But I got some fluorescent ones, and they're very cool because they are the same technology that is the kind of, it's like a honeycomb technology, but they have a fluorescent edging and fluorescent strap, so they're really visible. And we have a horrid fast road just outside our yard, and even just today we had some really fast drivers and it was really frightening, and something that Rhi and I have spoken about before, but having fluorescent material that's moving is a really good way of being much more visible. So yeah, really impressed with them. They're very velcro-y, they're super easy to clean, they come up great in the wash if you need to wash them, and I'm just loving it in general, you know, being able to protect my horse's legs, be a bit more visible, and also know that their legs aren't getting hot, which is obviously a really important thing to be doing because their legs are sensitive and we like to look after them. So thank you, Equilibrium. If you'd like to find out more about their range of products, you can head over to their website or find the link in the show notes.
All right, so we've been joined by Ruth Sharif. Welcome, Ruth. We are so excited to have you on the podcast. Miri and I were really keen to have a balance when we had the equine nutritionist on to also have a human nutritionist. We tend to wander into the territory of thinking about cycles, thinking about fueling and fitness as well. So we were really keen to have someone who touches those areas and is qualified in those areas. So thanks for joining us. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about you and what you do and your kind of real interest areas in nutrition.
Sure, yeah. So I came from a background originally of marketing and brand management many moons ago. And then when I had my kids back in sort of the early 2000s, I decided to retrain. So I qualified as a nutritional therapist and naturopath back in 2012 from C&M, College of Naturopathic Medicine, and have been practicing since then and just building my practice, seeing clients on a one-to-one basis, and also running various programs depending on what clients' needs are. So yeah, I came into it really because I had always been fascinated by what the underlying drivers for people's well-being and health, and rather than just treating the symptoms or the causes of imbalance or issues, trying to dig deeper and understand that. I actually was diagnosed then with breast cancer back in 2009 when I started my studies, and I just found at that point I thought, okay, nutrition for me has to be the foundation of everything. So it really helped as part of my recovery process, but also just to rebuild my strength. And I don't know, I just found it invaluable. And the whole learning process of understanding how it affected my energy levels, my mood, my digestion, which I'd ignored for many years. And it really wasn't great. And I just thought it was something that I had to live with. But I really started to address that and understood also the power of relevant and careful supplementation and what an impact that can have, and looking towards that rather than sort of traditional medicine, although it has its place, absolutely valid, but seeing what I could do as a preventative measure rather than reaching for the quick fixes.
Really
I saw Miri's face light up when you talked about, I think, particularly the gut balance and mood as well, those connections that traditionally we wouldn't have associated with nutrition. I think it's a really interesting area of exploration, for sure.
It is.
Definitely. I mean, and when we talk about the horses a lot, you know, the gut-brain balance with horses is like one of the most important things that we can do for our horses, and that was what we were discussing last week on the podcast with an equine nutritionist.
Yes.
But for myself, I've noticed a huge amount of change when I care for my body in terms of my mental health. Absolutely, and I definitely lit up when you said naturopath. I don't know if I can say
yes.
naturopathic. I've done. I know it's not the same. I've worked with homeopaths. My mum believed in homeopathy when I was a child, and so that sort of, I know it's not the same, but that kind of alternative way of doing things that's much more holistic, I guess, and much more aligned with how we were meant to live. I'm doing some air quotes for those listening, because bringing ourselves back to nature is a good place to start in some ways, like eating in a way that our body was designed to eat, I suppose, not the ultra processed, fast, sugar, convenient way that we have learnt to manage, I suppose.
Yeah, and is it wonderful that with horses as well, with something like a homeopathic approach, there's no placebo effect, and that's why I will often, not that I'm a homeopath, but I love the fact that, you know, children and animals respond very well to homeopathy, and I find that really intriguing when people try to dismiss it. So yeah,
I love that. I never thought about that. No placebo with horses. Sorry, Miri.
no.
No, I was going to say there was something I heard, and I really found this very interesting, because horses will self-serve if given the opportunity. Like in nature, they would go into nature and they would find what it was that they needed. And I remember listening to another podcast a while ago about a study they did on some children, where they presented children with lots of different ingredients.
I read this in
And
a
these
book.
kids went and like just took what they needed, and there was a little boy, and I think he had rickets, and I can't remember what it was that he chose, but it was quite a disgusting thing. It wasn't like a delicious fruit or something. It was like oily fish or something. Was it? I can't remember. Rhi.
I
We'd
think
have
you're
to maybe
thinking
look
of the
it up.
book. I'll put it in the show notes, but it was about like children like being open to the foods that they wanted to eat, like certain fruits and vegetables, and like the bodies being in tune with what they were deficient in, which was super interesting.
And that little boy, he like ate this thing every day when it was offered to him, and then one day he just completely stopped, and it was at that point when they, you know, did a blood test or tested something, and he had completely rebalanced himself. We'll have to find this information and put it in the show notes, because I mean, do you believe that our bodies call to things? Because I know I've found that.
I think if we're ready to listen, I think a lot of us have lost touch, haven't we, with what our bodies naturally need, and also we are constantly bombarded by information telling us what we should eat and ought to eat, and a lot of that advice is very good, and it's not just that, you know, all the old advice is bad and the new advice is good. It's definitely a mix of both. But I think also our because our gut microbiome is often in difficulty, not just because our diet may not be ideal, but also we're bombarded with toxins. We're very stressed. That has a big impact, and we kind of lose touch with what we ought to be craving. Does that make sense? Which is why it's interesting that it's like a young boy that's able to seek out what they need. I'm not sure as most adults, human adults, would be able to be that intuitive. So that's really interesting. But I think, you know, certainly in my experience, if I'm working with clients, whether it's a group or individuals, where we're doing a lot of work on gentle cleansing, I'm not talking about extreme juice diets and purging yourself, but I'm talking about eliminating things that are holding back, for example, our detox channels and our detox pathways, and putting in all the right fuel, all the plant foods, which I'm sure we'll go on to talk about, that, you know, and our gut microbiome rebalances. And for example, just to be quite specific, things like candida, which is very opportunistic yeast, which tends to colonize the gut quite a lot when there's not enough diversity, good diversity in there, or when we've had to take a course of antibiotics, for example, which we all have to every now and then. There's no demonizing of medicine, but, you know, that does wipe out all the good bacteria, a lot of the good bacteria, and something like candida can start to populate the gut too much, and that itself causes us to crave more sugar and more ultra. So it's really difficult to overrun that when and this is why it always comes back to the gut, treat the gut first, because if you're craving sugar constantly, that's something to think about. Are there other signs maybe that I've got a bit of a candida overgrowth systemically? I mean, there could be lots of other things, but that craving often accompanies that. So that's really hard to override that and then say, oh, I'm going to go for the green leafy vegetables or the eggs or the oily fish, when you're just you're not balanced in your gut health to start with.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think most of us, depending on your age, I guess, and your reference points, when we think of nutrition, when you think of athletic nutrition, you probably think of protein shakes. When you think of nutrition in general, you probably I have in my head the picture of the plate with the different sizes of what should be on the plate.
I still use that.
Oh, well, that's good. At least that's not, gone anywhere. Yeah. But for you, like, what is a baseline of nutrition? Like, if you have a new client or we're thinking about this from a real basic level, what does that look like for you?
I think, well, just talking about it, what a good balanced or well balanced plate would look like. I think definitely aiming for approximately, half of your plate to be consisting of some form of vegetables and a variety of vegetables. And I think that's really the message. One of the biggest messages, that our gut bacteria needs to be diverse in order to be healthy. And we need to feed the good bacteria. So rather than necessarily just jumping in with probiotic supplements and trying to get all of the good bacteria in that way, it's about saying, well, what sort of terrain, what environment do we want to create? And we know that ideally we want to try and be eating around 30 different plant foods a week, which sounds insane. But when you think about what a plant food consists of, so a red pepper is different to a yellow pepper, is different to a green pepper. You also, plant foods are things like nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, herbs, spices. So when you break it down that way and maybe try to incorporate 3 different vegetables with each meal. And again, it doesn't have to be a physical vegetable. It might be that you have some seeds with your avocado and, a bit of spinach or whatever. So that's, you're starting to build it up that way. So I think I start with that principle, try and get that variety of plant food. Always think about protein is important, whether you're an athlete or an equestrian or at various stages of life, particularly women moving into my phase, menopause phase, which, we do need more protein. But it also helps when we pair that protein with our good quality slow release carbs. So rather than having what I call naked carbs, where you get quite a big blood sugar spike on its own, when you pair it with protein, you get a much more balanced blood sugar profile. And that helps with mood, it helps with energy levels, it helps with body composition goals. Note, I'm not saying weight, I'm talking about body composition here, because we want to be within that nice parameter where we're not constantly stimulating insulin, because when insulin has to be secreted in order to reduce the sugar in the blood, then that's also, for example, the fat storage hormone, but it also can overcorrect often, and you end up getting that slump after meals. So having that nice balance, always considering what's my protein source, what's my carb that I'm going to pair with that, what's my slow release carb, and then as many plant foods as you can manage. So that's the basis. I like to talk about, minimal snacking if possible. I go back to the old fashioned, have a nutrient dense breakfast, lunch, and then it's very difficult for most people, I think, well, certainly me, to get through the afternoon without some sort of snack. So have a snack, but have some protein with that snack, so you're supporting yourself. And then, your evening meal, and try not to have that evening meal too late. And that gives your digestion a good chance to rest and recover overnight. And it means that your gut gets to do that, what we call the sweeping. It's called a migrating motor complex, where it moves the food from the small intestine down into the large intestine, which prevents the sort of bloating and the discomfort. It needs a fasting period in order to do that. So you don't necessarily need to extend the fast well into the day, but just give yourself a break overnight. Once you've had your evening meal, I think, then try not to eat after that if possible. Sorry, I've said a lot, I know.
No, there were two things that you said in there that were really interesting. One was about breakfast and one is about dinner. And I'd like to ask 2 things. So protein for breakfast has pretty much changed my life, I'd say.
Love eggs for breakfast.
Yeah, and really I'm very fortunate. I have chickens in my garden, so I'm like inundated with eggs, right? You probably heard my cockerel every now and then.
Yes.
He's merely there to protect the chickens. But I really did notice a difference in my patience, my ability to cope with difficult situations. I don't know if you know very much about what I do, but I deal with difficult horses a lot of the time, and they're very high energy and they're very complicated, and they come at me with all of these complicated emotions. And if I am feeling dysregulated or over my own limit, my tolerance for that is much lower, and then I find it's just harder. Doesn't mean I do something, but it just means that I'm finding it much more, it's like my tolerance level is far lower. Whereas when I eat breakfast that is protein, carb, vegetable, like you're talking about, so like for me, tell me if this is a good one, but I hope it is. It's been serving me pretty well. Seeded sourdough that I make at home myself, eggs from the garden, and then kimchi and avocado.
Oh, 10 out of 10, Miri.
10 out of 10. Thanks very much.
That is amazing, because you've got the protein in there, and we want to. Most of us need, if we exercise at all, approximately 1.5 grams. I would say somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 grams of protein per kilo of our own body weight, and that can be quite a lot when you think about the day. But if you're starting at breakfast, and this is why I think breakfast is such an amazing nutrition opportunity, and for people that skip it because they don't feel hungry, and I'm not saying you need to force feed yourself, but it's such a brilliant window of opportunity to get that first portion of protein in. So you've got that already in your eggs. The avocado, obviously full of healthy fats and fiber, prebiotic fiber, which feeds. So prebiotics feeds the good bacteria. Probiotics are or contain the good bacteria, if that makes sense. So pre is the fuel. So with the avocado, it's the fuel for the good bacteria. And then in your kimchi, or whether it's sauerkraut or gherkins or whatever it is you can stomach at that time in the morning, that is definitely, that's containing the good bacteria themselves. And that sort of fermented mix of vegetables, it's sort of supercharging your gut bacteria, which is incredible. And the only thing I would add to that, if you wanted to supercharge it even more, is I love like a gut booster mix. I pre-prepare one. So I put together in a jar, I will put together whatever seeds I have or can find, and that could be sesame, sunflower, pumpkin, which is amazing because it's very high in zinc, as are the eggs, to be fair, but it's another bit of zinc which we diminish very quickly in our body when we're stressed. Zinc goes very, very quickly, so we need to stay on top of it. What did I say? Yes, flaxseed, chia seed. You can put in cacao nibs. I don't know if you come across cacao nibs, but it's the raw cocoa, which is without the sugar, and they're nice and crunchy, but they contain loads of polyphenols, and we know polyphenols are, again, really brilliant for our gut health. So you just a mishmash of all of these things, and then you can sprinkle a bit on your eggs, in your yogurt, whatever we say, and you know that you're putting in that mix, you've got 10, 15 plant foods already. So it's really easy. You only need a teaspoon. There's also cheat ways of doing it. If you don't want to do it yourself, like M&S do one. Zoe have a nice sprinkle mix.
Oh, yeah. Like the everything bagel seasoning.
Yes, exactly.
Slightly more
It's just a great opportunity, to do that.
That's really interesting. Oh, sorry. No, I just was going to talk about dinner, because we talked about breakfast, and then you said about dinner, and I just wanted to ask, when you said about that fasted thing, because I know that was a bit of a buzzword for a while, wasn't it? Everyone was talking about, intermittent fasting and stuff, and I've done a fair amount of listening and reading about it, and come to the conclusion that, and please, I would love to be corrected on this, but like you were saying, you don't necessarily have to extend the fast, so you don't have to take it over 12 hours, but that 12 hours is, for women, a relatively safe place to be at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's emerging evidence now that suggests that whilst the sort of longer periods of intermittent fasting beyond 15 to 16 hours, they can be really helpful for men. They tend to thrive on that, and for people who are doing it to lose weight, it tends to work really well for men. It can also work well for women for a certain period of time, but I've seen in my experience that kind of the benefits of that then slow down, and that the more sort of you're in that state where you're extending that, we've got to remember that as women, and this is where the evidence is coming in now, we tend to need some fuel in the morning to balance our stress hormones. It's really interesting, Miri, you're talking about that with your breakfast and how that impacts your feeling of it's not stability, that sounds over dramatic,
regulation.
but calmness, regulation, exactly. That less sort of flinty energy, I think, where you're just feeling more on a level. So yeah, it's interesting that for women, and also, yes, there's the hormone side of things as well, but it's actually more about the brain and our hypothalamus, which is at the front of our brain, and how it responds to not having fuel and then going to exercise straight away. And the suggestion is that we will get a lot more out of our exercise, as well as our mood and our interactions with people, even if we have something small before we go and exercise. If you can't stomach your eggs and your lovely sourdough and everything else, give yourself something, some fuel, just 15 grams of protein, you know, whether it's that some lovely almond butter, which is so rich in vitamins and minerals, on maybe a piece of sourdough or some sort of cracker with a banana. Try not to have the banana necessarily on its own, because the banana on its own will make your blood sugar go like that, because it is as nutrient dense as it is. And I'm not demonizing bananas, but on their own, on their empty stomach, again, it's like a bit of a naked carb, you know, where your blood sugar will go up quite high. Whereas if you pair that with a few almonds or walnuts or whatever, or a bit of peanut butter, almond butter, anything, your blood sugar won't do this. It will have a much more gentle build. So you need then less insulin, which means that, you know, it's better for your body composition goals, it's better for your energy, better for your mood, because you're not having that dip and dive. Peak and trough.
Yes.
Get it the right way around. Peak and trough.
Ruth there with her hand
levels.
going in the air saying,
Exactly.
dive. And we're like, not quite yet.
No.
We've not gone up.
Yeah.
I always do that. And mix my metaphors. I'm brilliant at mixing metaphors.
Oh, we
but
love
anyway.
a mixed metaphor on this podcast.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting, is again talking about it. And there's other ways of blunting the blood sugar response as well. And I'm not just talking about this in the sense of, oh, we want to blunt blood sugar because we want to lose weight. It's about also, you know, managing mood and energy and our cravings and our ability to make good food choices. And I know there's a lot of talk about apple cider vinegar, but it is quite a unique thing, because it does, if you have that before a big meal or a sort of a more carb heavy meal, for example, it will blunt the blood sugar response, or the glycemic response, if you like, by something like 30 to 40%. And there is really good evidence about that now. But not only that, it also obviously stimulates digestive enzymes, so you'll feel less bloated or full after a meal. So that's really nice, and it can help the gallbladder to contract, to release bile, which helps with, you know, fat digestion, etc. So apple cider vinegar is a bit of a superfood in itself, because it's also a prebiotic, because it's fermented, a bit like your kimchi, Miri.
Kimchi.
Same, yeah.
How do you take apple cider vinegar?
How do you use it? Well, depending on what your goals are, I like to say to people who may have a mix of goals, but are working on their gut health, because everyone ends up working on gut health with me, but you have some apple cider vinegar in the morning in a little bit of lemon and water. And that can help, particularly people maybe of sluggish digestion, or maybe don't feel hungry in the morning, that feel that they need their digestion stimulated a little bit. Always have it with a straw or gargle afterwards, just in case because your teeth enamel can be affected by the lemon. So be a little bit careful with that. And I like to sort of bookend the day, and then before the evening meal or lunch, depending on, you know, when you have time to do it or when your biggest meal is, then have just a tablespoon in a little bit of water. You don't need to have a big thing of water. Although I have some clients who have it as a drink with sparkling water and apple cider vinegar to stop them having their wine in the evening.
Like a little gin and tonic.
Yeah, exactly. Which I suppose is a bit like kombucha when you think about it. But yeah, it's worth trying for how it feels on your digestion, but then also knowing that you're blunting that blood sugar response, which I think is important.
So obviously this is fascinating, by the way, and I'm quite glad you said that, because I always thought of apple cider vinegar as a bit of a fad, so I'm quite glad we had a discussion about it, because you just never know, do you? And I never looked into it, to be fair. So obviously we have a lot of equestrians listening to this podcast, and therefore performance is always front of mind. We've probably got some people who go eventing, which is obviously a big outlay on the system when you're doing 3 events in one day, but the majority of people listening to this will at least ride one horse. They possibly train in the gym as well. If they're not training in the gym, they're mucking out, they're poo picking, they've got a very active lifestyle. So I wondered if we could talk about, I guess, nutrition for performance, and nutrition for an active lifestyle, and just get your view on that, either in the broad sense, or maybe we could also do that and then talk about a competition day. That might be interesting.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think definitely the same principles apply when it comes to the sort of the composition of each meal. I think probably where perhaps someone is incredibly busy or is struggling to sit down and make themselves eggs or overnight oats with whatever else they're doing, sort of careful and relevant use again of, although food is always first, thinking about things like good quality protein powders. And I know there's a lot of confusion about protein powders out there, so I think it's probably worth mentioning.
Well, I use one, so I might ask you about that.
Yeah, and I use a different one, so I want to ask about that too.
Ooh, which one's better?
Well, I drink Clear Whey because I find normal protein powder difficult, like with adding loads of stuff to it. So I just drink a Clear Whey now from, I think it's My Protein's the one I use, and I just shake it with water and have it immediately after a workout, unless I'm running around, in which case I might have one during the day. But I know Miri does something different where she puts lots of other things in it to get extra vits and mins, which is a horrible abbreviation.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like it, bits and mins. Clear Whey. So I don't know that specific make, and I'm a bit of a food detective, so I study labels. So feel free to send me your labels, photos of your labels afterwards, and I'll scrutinise that. The things I will always look out for is kind of the source of, where the cows, is it a whey isolate? Is there other stuff in there? Are there sweeteners in there? I really hate sweeteners, apart from stevia, because sweeteners can wipe out a lot of your good bugs, your good bacteria. And unfortunately, quite a lot of health foods or performance foods will, promote the fact that they've no sugar, but then you look closely at the label and there'll be things like sucralose in there. Luckily, most of them don't have aspartame anymore. I mean, that's the worst of the worst. That's the Diet Coke one. But I probably shouldn't mention brands, but I think it's
absolutely fine.
It's okay. So I would just really be wary of sweeteners, and even xylitol is okay, but for some people they're very sensitive, and that can make them very bloated. So going as clean as possible. So that's where if yours is just plain whey protein, and whey protein is
a sweetener. I would almost guarantee it, because they have like flavours like cranberry and raspberry, and they're so sweet. When people ask me, it's like drinking juice. But they do have a non-flavoured one, so maybe I should switch to that.
Well, not necessarily. It depends what the sweetener is. So another make, am I allowed to mention makes?
Yeah,
go for it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a nice one, a company called Form Nutrition, and they do pea and brown rice protein powders, and they have all sorts of flavours. They are really, really tasty, and they just have stevia in there as a sweetener, but they also load in a lot of additional vitamins and minerals. So that one might be worth trying. So that way you get the flavour and the sweetness and the yumminess, but knowing that you're okay with that. There's also some really nice other companies. Another nice company called Will Powders I really like, and they do a lovely bone broth protein. So, when we talk about sort of, people ask me quite a lot about collagen and bone broth, and these are all things that, of course, are proteins in themselves. They may not contain all of the amino acids like a protein powder would, but they contain some of them, and they are really helpful for all of the connective tissue in our body. So not just our skin, and everyone's talking about collagen for anti-aging, skin, hair, blah blah blah, but forgetting the benefits that they have internally for our gut lining, our joints. So very relevant for equestrians. I know we sort of slightly strayed,
I was going to say,
but
I
actually it can be really helpful. No. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because collagen can be really helpful when we are exercising a lot and putting our bodies through quite a lot. There are other things as well, which I'll mention in a minute, but that's something to think about. And collagen peptides tend to mix really quite easily in things. Sometimes with protein powder, it can be a bit gloopy or a bit textury or not quite work, whereas a good quality collagen peptide, which is obviously difficult for vegans because there is no substitute, but where relevant for someone who isn't, then that can be a really helpful addition to have.
Bad news about the whey protein, Rhi. Contains sucralose.
I'm not surprised.
Quite a lot of things that sound quite bad for you include, and you can tell me if these aren't bad for you. So it's got sucralose. It's also got something called asasulfame K, and then it's got anti-foaming agents, which they don't sound brilliant, dimethyl polysiloxane, and silicon dioxide. So I think if we could upgrade your protein, I think that would be a good thing.
I do really like that one too.
Changes.
It's so much easier to drink. So yeah, I'm happy to change that. I also changed my horse's vitamins supplement last week, so I'll do one for myself.
Oh, look after yourself as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also I'm in a...
Whey protein does dissolve well, better than pea protein. It is actually, and it's a higher protein content. But there is another one I can send you. There's a company called the Organic Protein Company, and they have very clean whey protein powder. So there are other good options. Plenty.
I make a protein shake with peanut butter and banana and oat milk, and a date. I put a date in it these days too, to get a bit of extra. I don't know what the date does, but I saw it. But we're meant to be eating dates.
And fibre. No, dates. Funnily enough, we think that all dried fruit spikes our blood sugar, and some of them do. But dates, funnily enough, I don't know why. I think it's the amount of fibre in there. So yeah,
they're magic.
Is there like the sweetest one? Anyway, the people who are listening to this are going to be screaming at me because I keep taking us off track. Let's go back to nutrition for performance.
Yeah, and what else we can be doing.
So and training on, I guess on...
Well, no, but that was why we were saying it, because we were talking about protein shakes being a good thing. So what I tend to do when I can't eat my fantastic 10 out of 10 breakfast is I make myself one of these protein shakes. I've got a vegan protein from Free Soul, and it's like a women's designed brand. It's pea protein. I think they're quite good on social media. They hook, line and sinker a few people with their social media ploys, but actually I have got on really well with it. It's vanilla flavoured. When you put it in a milkshake like that with you blend it up, so banana, dates, peanut butter, then that feels like a good start to my day as well if I don't have the appetite for like a big sit down meal. So
definitely,
historically I ate bananas every day. That was my thing. I would just be like, I'm too anxious, I wake up anxious, my cortisol is through the roof. I want to talk about cortisol today, but I would just eat a banana and then I'd wonder why I absolutely felt terrible by 10 a.m. because of that crash, right? So instead of a banana, have your protein shake, right? Because then you're having your carb with your protein. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can throw in perhaps some jumbo oats as well, that's your bit of fibre, which is giving you your good sort of slow release carb. Or I often use like a gluten-free, we can talk about gluten later, but oat bran as well. So something just to give you that little bit additional fibre. But that would be great. And it's such a good thing to take. So going back to a competition day, if you don't have time to eat beforehand, you can take this with you en route. And that, that's a brilliant... You can also combine, people sometimes I think divide in their mind, or if I'm having a sweet sort of oat-based drink, I can't put in my vegetables, but you can still use something like a protein powder in an avocado and mango and maybe collagen peptides or whatever it is in there with some coconut water, because coconut water is full of natural salts and electrolytes, so that can be really nice in a smoothie. So those sort of green smoothies, couple of nice recipes for that. That's again a good thing to take, but making sure you put your protein in there, so your protein powder or your almond butter or whatever source of that, so you're not just going on a green smoothie without the protein. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
You must boost it.
I want to take a moment to thank one of the sponsors of our podcast, Redwings Horse Sanctuary, and today we're going to be talking about a particular pony who is actually helping to drive the future of medicine. Zeus is a Welsh Section A who was rescued by Redwings in 2014 from a site in Norwich with a donkey named Rio. He had an untreated sarcoid on his chest, and Rio the donkey had such overgrown hooves that he could barely walk. The pair were seized on welfare grounds and their owner was prosecuted under the Animal Welfare Act. Now, since then, Zeus has been rehomed and is now contributing to the University of Cambridge Department of Veterinary Medicine.
Oh.
So, isn't that cool?
I love that. What does he do?
After he was rescued by Redwings, Redwings were approached by the University of Cambridge, who were looking for a friendly and safe-to-handle horse with a heart murmur to join their teaching herd. And so Zeus has now become a resident of the University of Cambridge to help students learn how to detect the condition, as well as providing general equine behaviour and handling experience. Samantha Stevens, who is the Large Animal Clinical Skills Coordinator from the Department of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Cambridge, said, "When he's not working in his teacher role, he is a much loved member of our herd and enjoys spending time in the paddocks alongside new friends." So there's a picture of Zeus here. He is a very fluffy grey pony with a very long forelock, which is dark grey, and he's really cute, like fluffy as fluffy can be. He's adorable. I just love that.
So I think that's, to bring that back to why this is of relevance, it is the thing that Redwings do is they don't just rescue these ponies, but they rehabilitate them to be able to go and do jobs like this. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. Obviously Zeus has his life and he is cherished for his life on its own, but then he is able to then help at university. And as someone who rehabilitates, dysfunctional ponies and horses, that takes a lot of work, and so that needs a lot of support. So if you feel like you can help support Redwings in the wonderful work that they do, you can find their website in the show notes, or if you don't feel like a physical donation is possible, then please do support their social media and give them a follow.
Should we talk a little bit about sort of some of the supplements that might be helpful to think about for people?
I do take a supplement, but I hear such conflicting info about whether or not it's even worth it. There's some people who don't even think supplements do anything and that they're just not absorbed by the body in the same way. So I'm really keen to hear your perspective on that, actually.
Okay, yeah, so you're definitely right that the most expensive supplement is the one that we don't absorb, right? Because either our gut health isn't good enough, or our digestive enzymes are a little bit underpowered, or because of the supplement in question maybe has a lot of fillers or excipients or things like that, which make it difficult for us to break down. So I think, yes, be pretty fussy about your supplementation, and where possible at all, use some testing to find out what your body needs, or speak to a practitioner or a dietitian or a nutritionist to really uncover what you need, and doing that alongside working on your gut health, which helps you to absorb vitamins and minerals, not just from your supplements but from your food. So sometimes the reason we're not feeling great, or we're lacking in energy or lust for life, is actually we're not able to absorb what we need from food. So that's certainly worth thinking about. And obviously the more whole food we have, the more nutrient dense that food is, so we're getting more from it. But I would say, particularly for people who are really active, looking at a baseline at things like a really good multi-age and sex specific, if you like, multivitamin or multi-nutrient that gives you that broad spectrum of things, so you're not sort of overdoing it with one vitamin and then throwing something else out of balance. Is very finely tuned, balanced in the body with our biochemical pathways, so we don't want to push something too much at the expense of something else. But also, if you're not a really good fish eater, having a really good quality omega-3 supplement, that's very anti-inflammatory. And when we're putting our bodies through it, and our brains, of course, when we're working with horses or riding horses, then it's highly anti-inflammatory, but it's a kind of a baseline thing, I would say, to do those two. And then for recovery, looking at a really nice, good quality magnesium at night helps not just recovery from exercise, but it helps with sleep quality, it helps with energy metabolism, it helps with insulin sensitivity, and so many of us are deficient in magnesium. We sweat it out through our skin. Yes, Miri, what were you going to say?
What happens when you take magnesium and it doesn't seem to agree with you? I can talk about what actually happens to me, but, I have read, I've listened, I've thought, right, magnesium, I'm obviously deficient, I'm an anxious person, I literally sometimes will just wake up feeling like I'm on fire, like electrified. And if I take magnesium, I do have to go to the toilet quite fast.
Yeah.
Not the wrong type. I'm not taking magnesium citrate. I'm not mad, because I learned that there's more than one type of magnesium.
That was going to be my first question. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So there's certain types. If you're constipated, you should take magnesium citrate. Is that right? Whereas if it's it's magnesium glycinate that we want to be taking.
Yeah.
All of the
I would
magnesiums mess with my
all
gut.
of the magnesium. That's really interesting. So there's a quite a sensitivity there. Have you tried some of the other ones like the malate and the threonate, or have you just tried everything?
No,
Because
so
no.
I've tried magnesium glycinate and citrate. I got hook, line, and sinker by somebody on TikTok on that one. I won't talk about that, but that was not a good week of my life. But the glycinate is really interesting because that's the one that is mostly suggested. And actually, I was, because of the cortisol thing, and I'm very aware of the cortisol cycle, and my life is stressful, and I struggle, and da 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 da. There's this product that I've tried this week actually called by Free Soul called Cortisol.
Oh, nice.
And it's L-theanine, it's magnesium, it's ashwagandha. And I thought, I've had good results with ashwagandha and L-theanine before, and I thought, you know what? I'd like to have a drink. It's a drink, it's easy, it doesn't have loads of sweetener in it, it has stevia. So I was like, okay, this is good. Toilet trouble.
No.
I told you we were going to talk about this, Rhi. Interesting,
that
right?
is really interesting. Really
Do you
interesting.
think I should just
don't-
stick with it?
Not necessarily. I would
Real
say,
commitment.
yeah, that's real commitment. But I love the other ingredients in there. I mean, I love that sound of that combination, right? Because the ashwagandha is so brilliant for supporting a really healthy stress response. L-theanine is an amino acid, as you know, that you find in green tea, but it really helps to calm an overactive mind or a busy mind. So it's wonderful, and it's really, really safe and very well researched. So it's actually sometimes quite hard to find those two things in the same supplement. So I was really interested to hear you say that. So that's really a shame, but I think you might need to separate them out. I'd love you to try like a threonate or a malate and just see
Okay.
how they go. Yeah, but you're obviously very sensitive. Does that happen with any other foods or anything else? Rhi is laughing.
I am
In a
like,
loving way.
in a loving,
Yeah.
but my God, is she a sensitive person kind of way? Because yes, yeah, I am highly sensitive. I can't put SPF on my face because I get eczema. Like my body is like nature and water and life,
Yeah.
and don't eat anything because it's, if I eat too much yeast, my liver packs up on me. It's complicated. My body has been through a lot. I think I've lived in a sensitive body my whole life, and I didn't know for a very long time. And it is my superpower now because it means I am like this cool portal when it comes to other people, and they feel very safe to talk about things around me. And sensitivity has its strong points, but yeah, it also has its issues. I have found one supplement that I do really like, and it's called Indi, INDI. And that is ashwagandha, L-theanine, and chamomile, but it's kind of like a dropper thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So
lovely.
that seems really nice, and that really helps me have nice sleep. And I do tend to find that one's good. But
Brilliant.
the magnesium part is a shame.
Magnesium. That's a shame. I
Interesting.
think try a different form and let's
Okay.
see. Yeah.
You have to update us,
Really.
maybe.
Yeah.
Well, this is
Keep
super interesting
shitting myself
because
or not.
exactly the shit update. But talking about sensitivity, I think equestrianism is one of the most emotionally charged sports because our partner is an animal and we don't even speak the same language. Without the metaphorical element of that conversation, but it can be very emotionally charged, and I'm really keen to hear about your perspective on the relationship between nutrition and mood and how we balance those, because I think a lot of us want to show up to the yard and be our most mentoring, calm, clear-headed, sensitive and emotional selves, but horses don't always allow for that, create that environment, and our lives are hard. So how do we balance, how do we get our nutrition to help us with those mood things, and how is nutrition affected by mood?
Yeah, I mean, I think we will come back to the gut briefly if that's okay.
Yes, no,
because
definitely.
that gut brain connection through that vagus nerve, which remember works both ways. If you think about the arrows going both directions, so if our gut health is not great, and we know that for people that struggle a lot with depression, for example, a lot of anxiety, their gut microbiome is probably not as diverse as somebody else necessarily. We also know that so much of our serotonin, which is our Shortcut, it does a lot of things, serotonin, by the way, but it's mainly, we know it as our feel good hormone, right? Our happy hormone. It's made by cells in the gut lining, a huge amount of it. So, and certain bacteria species help and encourage that. And we think now that these bacteria species themselves can also produce serotonin, which is just fascinating. So we need to come back to that. But how do we do that if we're feeling stressed? So we kind of have to work at both ends, I think. We need to eat as well as we can, get as many of those prebiotic foods in as we can. But also, I think if there's been an issue that's been upsetting our gut health for a long time. I often have people that will come to me say, well, I've just always dealt with constipation, for example, and that's just me. I'm like, no, it's not you. And they go, well, I go every fourth day. I'm like, no, that is not right. I don't care what the doctor might say to you. Yeah, sorry.
That's what we say about our horses. In the intro, we were like, people saying, oh, my horse is just always tilted to the left. And we're like, no. Not a thing. Same with us. We make these excuses for stuff that's not cool to have to deal with.
Yeah, and we feel like we need to just get on with it. But I would really say to people, no, just don't ignore it, because there's multiple reasons behind that. And then, constipation brings, or I don't know, we've just settled on constipation, but just as an example, will always lead to bloating and discomfort. And also you're not clearing out toxins, and chances are that when we look at the gut, we talk about the gut microbiome, sure, but we also need to think about the gut lining, and our gut lining needs to be pretty impermeable, not totally, obviously, because food particles, but if you've got what we know as, you've probably heard the term leaky gut, where you've got too many gaps, or those gap junctions are too loose, you're going to get things escaping from the gut where they should stay and then be eliminated into the bloodstream, which then sets up its own immune response. We have to produce antibodies. So we need to work on our gut lining as well as the gut bacteria and everything in there. And there are lots of lovely things we can do to help that. And Miri's...
Can I get a gold star for this one? Because I think I know the answer. Fibre.
Yes.
We have to have more fibre. My mum said she read something in New Scientist about the fact that if we don't eat enough fibre...
Mary's parents, both
scientists. If we don't eat enough fibre, then our gut bacteria actually eats the lining of our gut instead of the fibre.
Some species can, certain species that we know are not helpful. But the other things that are really important for that gut lining are things like, well, we talked about collagen. Zinc is really important, because think of how that rapid turnover of cells in our gut lining. Zinc helps to heal that. But also some lovely things that we actually give our horses a lot of the time. Things like slippery elm, right? We've heard about slippery elm and marshmallow root for horses with ulcers, or we're trying to protect the lining. We use those in naturopathic medicine and nutritional therapy to help heal the gut lining in people, as well as glutamine, which you might have heard of, which is a supplement that's often used. So they're the things that we can do to help the lining of the gut. Then you're protecting yourself from increased risk of inflammation, because every time things escape into the bloodstream that shouldn't really be there, that's an inflammatory response, right? So we want to do both. We want to do lining and gut microbiome. So I think that's really important when it comes to our health. And then using things like, maybe not for everyone, but magnesium is a really good starting point for the nervous system. And some lovely, but I must say though, be really careful if you're on any medication, not with magnesium, but just introducing perhaps some of these adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha. L-theanine is usually pretty safe. Even the ginsengs, which provide a lot of resilience and can help through difficult times, absolutely brilliant. But just be careful to check for any interactions with your medication in case they have an additive effect. So again, speak to someone about it before you jump in. And there's quite a lot of products out there that are lovely, but that may combine 3 or 4 different herbs. And if you're someone, for example, who has to take a thyroid medication or an antidepressant or whatever it is, you just need to be careful that it doesn't interact, or you take them at very different times of day. But just speak to someone about that before you jump in. But that would definitely be my first port of call for someone who's dealing with stress or high anxiety or even adrenal fatigue, people who are I bet there's a lot of people in the horsey world who are dealing with adrenal fatigue. They're absolutely wiped out. Is how can we support your adrenal glands? How can we calm things down, but at the same time enable you to get through your daily life? Because you can't necessarily just afford to stop and say, I'm taking 3 weeks off. You've got to keep going, right? So
Right.
you're looking at the adrenal gland health itself, what are the foods that will support that, but then just not giving too much in the way of overstimulation, because that can again just sort of get you through that difficult period, but then you collapse afterwards. It's quite a fine balance, I think.
That is something when I burnt out last year really badly. No doubt all part of this whole thing I'm going through. And, you know,
Sorry
one
to
day
hear
fine,
that.
next day not fine. Thank you. It's been hideous.
Okay.
But one of the things is my therapist at the time, she said, can you take a month off? And I was like, no, I couldn't. I can't. I have to close my business. I'd have to lay my staff off. I wouldn't be able to do it. And I do think a lot of equestrians are in that same position, especially those that are professionals. But, you know, also I think of like mothers, and they're a mum and they've got a horse, and then they maybe also got a job. You know, how can we support our adrenal side of things? Because I think there would be a lot of people, like I've got a friend of mine who, she's like, I'm tired all the time.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's something, and it's kind of, can be a little bit of a woolly term, or, you know, word when people talk about adrenal fatigue and how do I know if I've got adrenal fatigue. So I guess to start with, so what are the signs? Perhaps, you know, if you are someone that is sleeping quite well at night, your sleep is pretty good, but you still wake in the morning feeling really exhausted. So in other words, you've gone beyond the point where your body is naturally producing enough cortisol in the morning. We need cortisol in the morning to get going and to get on with our day. So if you find that in spite of a good night's sleep, I say in inverted commas, you're waking feeling exhausted, and then you
Really
get
just
through your
yawning
day.
away over there.
Ironically.
And maybe you have these pits and here we go again, troughs and peaks. I'm not going to use the hand signals because I get them wrong. But you get this sort of second wind at sort of 10 p.m. If that kind of resonates with you, that, you know, you felt absolutely exhausted at 3 or 4, but by 10 p.m. you're like, right, now I'm ready to go. So you find it difficult to wind down. So almost your circadian rhythm is also taken a bit of a hit. And one of the best ways to sort of help that sort of proper regulation of cortisol and melatonin is actually something that probably a lot of equestrians do naturally, but getting up and out within, you know, getting some sunlight and daylight on our heads within the first hour of waking is really valuable, because it helps, yes, with cortisol, but it affects the pineal gland in our head, and that sort of programs when your melatonin is supposed to kick in later on. So it helps that circadian rhythm. So that's really important for the sleep side for adrenal fatigue. And then, yes, I think certainly, you know, things like vitamin C foods, really, really important for adrenal health. So the you know, kiwis, strawberries, peppers, citrus fruits, making sure you've got plenty of vitamin C foods. But I think for someone who is really feeling like that, they probably also need some sort of very specific supplements to help with that. That's difficult to do on your own. And
So
also it's
a
difficult.
blood test?
A blood test or saliva test. They will often do an adrenal saliva test. That would be really helpful to identify if that's the issue. But then looking at what you can take specifically to support adrenal health. And again, this is where adaptogenic herbs can be really helpful. There's certain adrenal formulas where things can be combined together to help adrenal health.
Yeah, I love that.
And then try not to exercise too much when you've got adrenal fatigue, which is really hard if you have to exercise, right? But you shouldn't, if you're feeling that exhausted, you should try and maybe moderate the very hard cardio sort of stuff.
Yeah, I love this. I'm really enjoying this. Another trope, and selfishly, I have a really sweet tooth, so this is just interesting for me. But another trope in the equestrian industry is sort of living on chocolate and biscuits, like if you walk into any tack room, usually it's not a bowl of fruit in there, let's put it that way. So I wonder if we could touch on sugar a little bit and talk about that and sugar spikes and how we manage sweet tooths, etc. I mean, the only way I've managed to manage it really is to cut out sugar during the week, not religiously in terms of I still eat fruit and things, but I won't eat refined sugar during the week because I just find the spikes so difficult to manage. But I'm really keen to hear from an actual nutritionist on
Sure.
how that works.
I think it's really funny every time I walk into the tea room in the yard where my horse is, the amount of chocolate and sweets and biscuits that everyone has like really kindly brought the staff to boost them, but there's nothing there that's kind of beyond sugar, right? Because everyone wants to sort of nurture. But so yeah, it is a big thing, and you know, for lots of reasons it's difficult. We've spoken already about the blood sugar dips, but also for someone, just briefly touching on the adrenal thing again, that's a constant stimulation, right? In the same way that coffee, whilst it has its place, and I like coffee and it's actually good for the gut and has lots of other benefits, but if you're using it to prop yourself up in the same way as if you're using sugar to prop yourself up, then it's really stressful for your adrenal glands actually. But also we know that the preferred fuel for the pathogenic or unhelpful gut bacteria is sugar and unprocessed foods. So the more sugar we have, particularly when it's, again, naked sugar, so on its own, on an empty stomach, which it often is for people who are riding all day or whatever else, they're like, oh, I just need something to get me through the next hour, then that is fuel for those unhelpful bacteria, and particularly the yeast and the candida. And, you know, we spoke about how people that maybe have a yeast overgrowth, not talking about something extreme, but you crave more sugar, and then it's a vicious circle because then you're feeding those yeast strains as well when you have sugar. So hopefully I'm kind of putting people off, but you know, sugar can sort of, natural sugar is better than any sort of sweeteners and all of those things. So I think that's worth mentioning. But again, pairing it with something. So, you know, making sure the sugar isn't on its own, having it with some nuts. If you're having some chocolate or some dark chocolate, which is really good for our gut because it contains polyphenols. So that's the good news. A really good quality dark chocolate is actually beneficial for our gut because of the polyphenols that help to feed particular strains of bacteria that are often, so if I do a stool test with a client, I see, gosh, yes, yet again, this group of bacteria has not been detected, and what do we need to, and they're beneficial, what do we need to fuel that? It's the polyphenols that you get in olives, berries, dark chocolate, all of those dark fruits. So I think trying to steer away from sugar, but also understanding that we might need a bit of a boost, and maybe having access to something like, you know, dates, for example, having some yogurt, a few spoonfuls of yogurt with some berries, some cinnamon. Cinnamon is great because it's naturally sweet, but it also blunts the blood sugar response in the same way as apple cider vinegar does. So it's really good thing to put in there, but it's nice and sweet. And then throw in some seeds and maybe some cacao nibs. So you have a little kind of mini yogurt bowl that feels like you're getting some sweetness in there, but it's obviously all the good stuff as well. So I quite like that.
Another thing I like to make is like really healthy Rocky Road.
Yeah.
And you hear Rocky Road and you hear chocolate and marshmallows, but I do like dark chocolate and a rich tea biscuit generally for a bit of something biscuity, and then cranberries and as many nuts as I can find in the cupboard. And that is such a good pick me up, middle of the afternoon.
Brilliant.
That and a cup of tea. That really gives me a boost. And I think, you know, it's things like that, isn't it? Like if you could give a gift to the yard instead of taking them a packet of biscuits, go and spend 20 minutes and make a healthy Rocky Road like that. You know, that's a lovely thing to do.
So true. It's so true. And you're getting the protein in there, you're getting the fibre in there, all of those things, your gut is going to go, oh yes, this is what I need. And that will encourage it to feed those good strains.
And sugar is a difficult thing because sugar has a connection to dopamine.
Yeah.
Is it because? Well, I mean, nice things have a connection to dopamine, right? And it's like that anticipation of the nice thing, like, oh, I'm gonna have a biscuit and a cup of tea. It's that dopamine cycle that you get into when you're eating sweet things, and that takes a lot of training to undo. And if you are stuck in that cycle and you are there, like, I am addicted to sugar, which is what a lot of people say. Are you best to go cold turkey? Are you best to wean yourself off?
It's really hard to say, isn't it? Because I think probably, so for certain things like coffee, I wouldn't go cold turkey because that's really uncomfortable if you wanted to give up coffee, for example. I think you need to do it very gradually because you get headaches and everything else. Not that I'm proposing
Because of the
you
caffeine?
must. Yeah, because of the caffeine. And I run these sort of cleanse and reboot programs, and that's where people, they have to give up a few things during the week, and we put lots of good stuff in, and I support them with something I'm going to mention now when they come off the sugar, because the sugar is often a big thing for people to stop having, but they're not allowed to have any sugar for a week to 10 days. So we talk about sort of what are you going to have instead. Maybe you're going to have things like we mentioned, the yogurt pot, maybe a date with a nice nut stuck inside it, for example. That's really nice. But also allowing yourself things like really nice herbal teas that maybe have licorice or aniseed in there, or green tea with jasmine. They're all really lovely. But then thinking about what are also the things that can, so I don't know if you've heard about the blue-green algae family, like the chlorella and spirulina and those.
Yes.
So
I feed my
Yeah.
horse spirulina
there we go.
for protein,
Yeah.
but maybe
Yeah,
for
it's
other things.
brilliant protein and also B12. But what's really interesting is that when you get your dose of your greens up to a certain level, so you need to start gradually because they're a little bit detoxing and alkalizing as well. So if you take a whole load, you might get a headache. But when you have those as part of a kind of a sugar withdrawal, if you like, they really help to curb cravings. So particularly the spirulina can be really, really helpful. So that's sort of one of the things that I would have somebody on who's coming off sugar or has a lot of cravings. And they find that particularly sort of the afternoon blood sugar slump, if they have some of these at lunchtime, whether you're having in powder form or in capsule form, it really helps with that. And then you can sort of wean yourself off. So it depends on how strong the craving, but that's where that can be really helpful, I think, to use something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think for a lot of women, and for myself as well, it's aligned slightly to their cycle. Like I find I want to be really healthy at some times, other times I crave lots of carbs, lots of protein. Then obviously lots of people know that you crave chocolate. That's a bit of a trope now, but like the week before your period. But that, I think, is something that a lot of women struggle with, and that I think the horses add a whole new dimension to that. So that's sort of interesting from a nutrition point of view.
Yeah, and I don't think we should beat ourselves up about that. And I think, if you need some chocolate, have some chocolate, but have some. Yeah, life is too short, but maybe just make yourself better and feel better and have a few nuts with it, because it really will make a difference to how your
So
body
what, like fruit
deals
and
with
nut
that.
is good? Fruit and
Yeah,
nut?
this is what someone says, Cadbury fruit and nut.
I didn't even think of that.
There's quite a few people have asked me that. I'm like, yes, I suppose so.
But genuinely, like, we're laughing. But do you mean when you say have some chocolate, do you actually mean have some dark chocolate?
Look, ideally, but
Fine.
Otherwise have some other chocolate, but just not on an empty stomach and not on its own. I think that's the thing I'd really like to stress.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can we talk about hormones?
Yeah.
Because I think that we seem to have touched on hormones a few times over the last few episodes, because Rhi and I have got into this hilarious discussion where sometimes Rhi will come and be like, life's ending, this is really bad, I can't do this, everything's struggling, I'm up shit creek, this is really hard. And I'll be like, is there any chance you're going to get your period? And she's like, oh yeah, that'll do it. And we were talking about like how our hormone cycles affect us, and I am still trying to work it all out. And I think that I found out that I'm quite low estrogen, and I think that affects my anxiety, because you're low estrogen, because you're super stressed, so you have low estrogen, and then because you are low estrogen, you're super stressed, you become more stressed, and it's like this really shit cycle that I've ended up in a little bit. Please correct me at any time if you think that I've been misinformed previously. No. But I've struggled. People have said, eat eat to support your hormones? Like, are there any things that you could even just give to me, you know, if it was just me, you and I having this conversation and we were working together, that you'd say, actually, yeah, around the time, so like around ovulation, for example, I notice my anxiety is much worse. And I think it's because my body is under more pressure to produce more estrogen, and it kind of can't. I've had some acupuncture recently that has really, really helped, but I'm interested if there was anything nutritionally I can be doing that you would be like, oh yeah, this is the thing, this is the supplement that I could
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, because to try and there are sort of suggestions that you eat slightly differently around different times of your cycle, but I'm not sure anyone has the time or the bandwidth to do that. I've certainly never been able to implement that myself. I think it's a question of trying to eat as well as you can. I think it's definitely, the healthy fats are really, really important as part of that cascade of, you know, how estrogen is produced and where it's coming from. So thinking about that, and not sort of skimping on the healthy fats. I think getting a lot of your oily fish in, making sure you've got a really good, omega-3 supplement, like we said before, especially if you're not eating fish regularly. That is so important. And understanding, I suppose, the natural sources of estrogen might be helpful as well. So the phytoestrogens, things like the flax seeds and the lignans and all of those sorts of foods, where you're getting and the tofus and the tempehs, where you're getting
soya,
natural, exactly, soya in there, and that they are also healthy estrogens as well, the phytoestrogens. So. Not that you necessarily know this, but we all metabolize our estrogen quite differently, and some of us can metabolize it, like me, and that's why I got my breast cancer, into more dangerous forms of estrogen, right? So we want to try and promote the right path of detoxification and metabolism of our estrogens. So using things that we know will support that, like the cruciferous vegetables as well. So the broccolis, the cabbages, the cauliflowers, they all support the liver, which in turn also supports healthy estrogen metabolism. So I think those sorts of things. So I think natural ways of making sure you have enough or as many phytoestrogens in your diet as possible could be really helpful.
Okay, thanks. That is really helpful. I love tofu these days. It's like become a thing, which is really interesting.
Actually.
You know, if you boil it, it's life changing. You boil it for 10 minutes. Boil tofu for 10 minutes in salty water, and then it changes the structure. I heard a food scientist talking about it yesterday. It changes the internal structure of it, and it will absorb any marinade that you put on it, like that, because normally it sits on the outside.
Well, to be fair, I mean, when I do mine, you're supposed to take it out. I use the extra firm one. I can't remember the name of the company, but it's really good.
Tofu.
Probably, yes, that sounds right. Tofu, really good. And you put it in cold water so that it can absorb the water. But to be fair, I normally fry mine. It's like, this is going to sound like a terrible choice of ingredients, but soy sauce, honey, bit of oil, fry it, and then noodles with lots of veg, obviously. But
Sounds
delicious. It's really good.
Try boiling it first and then fry it.
I'm going to do that.
Life changing.
Yes, because sometimes I find you have to marinate it for quite a long time for it to get any flavour, and then it's sort of, everyone complains.
I'll send you the video that I watched yesterday. She's a food scientist. It was a really interesting video.
Shall we end on cortisol and stress? I know you want to talk about cortisol, Miri, and I think stress is in the life of every equestrian, and I would be so interested to know if we can balance that nutritionally. I'm getting the sense that, as with most things we've talked about over the course of this season, that actually it's not about fixing stuff, it's about preventative, all around, everyday decisions that help us get there. But cortisol, how can we support lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, through our nutrition?
Yeah, and I think the first thing to say is that sometimes cortisol is a bit too demonized, and we have to remember that we need cortisol. It's our get up and go, it's our fire.
It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, right? Everyone's talking about it.
Exactly. So let's not be too scared of it. It's natural that we need cortisol, especially competition days, early in the morning. It's there. I think the difficulty is, and the risk is, when it becomes sort of that chronic, ongoing cortisol, which accompanies chronic ongoing anxiety. It's when it hangs around, it's there for a reason to help us, get away from danger, deal with a stressful situation, and then it should decline. Our body should manage that, and we shouldn't be scared of that. So again, looking at ways to our blood sugar control has a big impact on it as well. So, making those choices we've talked about quite a lot, ensuring we have the protein in there, that our blood sugar is well balanced, that will support that as well. Listening to our body clocks so that we have a chance to switch off that cortisol appropriately in the evening. We understand now more about how sleep is so important and so critical. So guarding our sleep fiercely without getting obsessed. Like this, people are going around saying, if you haven't got 8 hours, like you're doomed and that's it. And that's really not helpful, because there's a lot of people out there who can get some really good quality sleep in 6 hours and genuinely they're okay on that. There are other people that need 9 hours. So let's take a more personalized approach and not beat ourselves up again if we're not able to get 8 hours sleep. We do what we can to support ourselves around that. We have a nice bedtime routine. Some of us are using magnesium. We might have an Epsom salt bath. We might use things like L-theanine in the night, which is really lovely. And there's a really nice combination Viridian do. I love it. It's lemon balm and L-theanine together. So the L-theanine is activating the GABA receptors, calming and quietening the brain. And the lemon balm is a very nice, mild sedative. And they're very safe ingredients. So using that at night time as part of a wind down, and just, doing the usual, making sure your room is really, really dark. But that first thing in the morning, you're out getting that daylight, trying to reset that sort of cortisol and adrenaline versus your melatonin when you need it. So at least that's a starting point of bookending your day. And managing blood sugar, definitely. And also just thinking, again, back to our gut and how we can support that connection so that our gut feels happier, and that's transmitted to our brains as well, where a lot of these neurotransmitters are obviously being fired. So I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I think, as someone who is, I pulled a sad face when you said about that, the kind of the chronic cycle, and I would say that I am really currently living in the middle of that at the moment, and that's it's really, really hard. And to give someone who's listening some validation, if you wake up feeling like, you're kind of been like electrified, is that the cortisol? Is that kind of over cortisol? Yeah,
that sort of tired but wired feeling. Which is
exhausted, like I could stay in bed, but also it's like I'm charged up, and I go through periods of time sometimes where I wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning feeling like that, and then I can get back to sleep, but it's really, really tough. So if you're going through that,
really
then
difficult.
I'm with you, sister or brother, whoever you might be.
Absolutely.
Tough stuff. Well, thank you, Ruth. Gosh, that was insightful to say the least. I think that was going to be so helpful for people. And I think as well, not only has it been very educational, but it's actually been very, helpful in the sense of giving people some actually proactive things they can really be doing. Because I think that's often what we struggle with. We get all this advice, we see all this stuff on the internet, but we don't really know what we can actually do about it. And thank you for coming on today. I think you will have shaped a lot of, helped a lot of people.
I think thank you for being so open with your own journey and experience as well. Like, I was quite conscious not to touch on that because we hadn't discussed it beforehand, and I didn't want to, open that whole piece. But I think there may be people out there who are going through that themselves or have been through that, and for that it might resonate. I don't know if you ever talk about that in any of your content, or whether it's something, if somebody is going through breast cancer or other types of cancers, whether it's something that you...
Yeah, I'm really open about it, Rhi, because I feel it's really important, and I'm someone who has come out the other side and feels better and stronger than ever before. But going through it is, honestly, it's a fearful time, no matter what sort of diagnosis you have. So that's a definite cortisol spike and extraordinaire going through that. But yes, I do. We have to be very careful as nutritional therapists to say, obviously, our approach, we're highly regulated when it comes to treating people with cancer, because obviously we don't do that, but supporting people going through that and understanding how nutrition can help. Absolutely. I mean, I feel really passionately about that, because there's so much that we can do around that, and then also as to prevent recurrence as well, and that's really important. Understanding what to do if someone's been through that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tough. Very tough.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of what you do. We will put your information in the show notes. Is there any particular way that you would like to tell people that they can reach out to you? Is there anything that's really helpful?
No, whatever. WhatsApp, email, website. It's just ruthsharif.com, so that's easy. Then they can find out a bit more about me and contact me if they want to. Yeah,
Brilliant.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was really
likewise.
nice talking to you both.
Thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we will see you for next time.
See you soon.